Hello, everybody. Aaron Van Trojan with Geneva Financial, talking to you today about loan officer compensation. Surprising, nearly a decade after the law went into effect, we're still having these conversations. But the reason this has come up of recent is I happened across a Housing Wire article. It stated that the NBA is pushing to change the loan officer compensation laws. I'm sure they'd love to just throw it out altogether if they had their chance. Read the article, moved on. It's come up numerous times, didn't pay much attention to it. Until this morning, I watched the National Real Estate Post. Cheers, Frank and Brian. I love your post, so don't take this the wrong way. But they also commented on this move to change loan officer compensation. I do think that their opinion on subject is dead wrong. And I'll explain that to you. And I think it's very, very important for people to understand, especially those of you that weren't in this industry prior to the regulation. But before I do that, let me just self-admittedly explain that I understand that the laws are imperfect. The regulation is imperfect. It causes complications, not only to the industry, but also to the consumer. It's not perfect. I've been through it, I deal with it, but I still think the rules are good, and they're good as is. Not all of them, but on the topic of loan officer compensation. Because when we start to move, and if we do start to make moves in the loan officer compensation laws, I believe that the consumer is going to lose. So I'll explain this from two different viewpoints. First, a business viewpoint. From the originator standpoint, prior to 2008, and the collapse of the financial industries, and before the laws went into place, the average loan originator did not make 250 basis points per transaction. Now, many of you watching this are saying, hell, I don't make 250 right now. But you've made that choice by the company that you work for. And for those of you who say that Geneva Financial pays 250 basis points because they just charge the consumer more, that's not true either. Because we modeled this company to make a very small margin per transaction and pay the lion's share to the loan officers, and been doing so for 11 years and still offering the consumer a very, very, very competitive rate. So that's not the issue either. Loan officers today are actually forced to make a set comp plan specified by their company. At Geneva Financial, it tends to be higher than the national average, but ultimately the loan officer has that choice. They can interview a number of different companies. There's thousands of them out there, and they'll all pay different based on the services they provided and so on and so forth. But it's their choice, and they can make that choice. So it doesn't hamper loan officer compensation. And because most loan officers in this business today, while this might rub many of you the wrong way, aren't the best salespeople. And the minute you allow them to willy-nilly lower their compensation every time they get into a competitive situation, despite them all saying, I don't sell price, I sell value, but the minute price comes up, they try to drop it. They will. When given the option, when given the choice, the ability to just lower their compensation for no reason, they will do that. So the loan officer will lose when you drop loan officer compensation laws. They'll lose because they'll ultimately make less. From a consumer standpoint, which is the sole reason this law went into effect, it wasn't to hamper business. And people have to understand also that despite what most people say, that all the regulation hampered the financial industry and hampered economic growth. Well, the stock market's hitting record highs. How many times? Has it been at an all-time high and keeps surpassing those all-time highs? And real estate has never been more valuable in the history of this country, all post the greatest financial regulation that's ever been implemented, Dodd-Frank. This all happened during the greatest regulation. So to say that regulations hampered growth is absurd. It's absurd. And Geneva Financial, that was created amidst all the great regulation has done exceptionally well while being very, very compliant. But back to the consumer, because the law was put into effect for the consumer prior to the loan officer compensation laws. Loan officers were able to charge huge margins on negative amortizing loans because they paid a tremendous amount of money because of their rapid increase in interest rate if short-term rates went up. Loan officers charged 3-year hard prepays on a 2-year adjustable rate mortgage. Loan officers took prime A paper candidates and jammed them into subprime loans because they paid a lot more money than your standard agency or government loan. And this wasn't just the one-offs, the bad people. We didn't melt down the entire global economic financial system and the mortgage industry because of a few one-offs. This was widespread and rampant in the mortgage industry, as it would be again if the compensation laws didn't go into place, or if we were to roll them back. And God help you if you were a minority, first generation from another country, you had an accent, because all those people paid more prior to the loan officer compensation laws. They did, and they would again. The one thing that this law did is it did protect the consumer. Yes, at a cost at some time. At some point, some transactions, yes, consumer protection did come at a cost, but it helped the masses, and it was very, very, very effective. So to roll this back, you're going to put the consumer back at risk, as well as your paycheck. So instead of throwing out the law, because the vast majority of my competition has done everything they can to find workarounds and loopholes and work in the gray, don't throw out this law because it's imperfect and most people are in violation of it. Enforce the law. Because if you enforce the law that was designed to protect consumers, you'll do just that. And loan officers can continue to make more money than they had in the past. It's a win-win for everybody.